What a time to be a professional wrestling fan when you get shows like this one that we got tonight from All Elite Wrestling. Welcome everyone, this is DerekJ Speaks bringing you your All Out 2021 pay-per-view live review. I am your host, DerekJ Speaks, and top to bottom, this is easily one of the best pay-per-views that we have gotten in a very long time. This is high up there as one of my favorite AEW pay-per-views since the company began back in 2019. And I don't know about you guys, but I just had a lot of fun watching this show. Start to finish, it was amazing. A lot of the action, a lot of the moments, a lot of the matches, including what in many ways might go down as one of the best tag team matches of all time, and one of the best steel cage matches of all time. And you pull a 1-2 punch at the end of the show with the debuts of Adam Cole and BRYAN DANIELSON. The much anticipated debut of BRYAN DANIELSON following CM Punk's big return to professional wrestling and debut in AEW a few weeks ago on Rampage. The next big name up was BRYAN DANIELSON. Some thought it was going to be at the Arthur Ashe Stadium show in New York later this month, but many people started to believe the rumors that BRYAN DANIELSON would make his debut at All Out, and that's exactly what happened. And I thought it was a very fun ending to an overall very fun show. And in order to go through this whole show, we got to start from the very beginning. Before that, I want you all to know that if you like what you hear and you see, why don't you give this channel some love? Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, follow this channel for all the wrestling content that you desire, and follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks for more personal thoughts that I have on many of the shows throughout the week. And that's about it. Let's go ahead and get right into this show. Start with the buy-in. We had a big 10-man tag team match with the Hardy Family Office, represented by Matt Hardy, Private Party, and TH2, taking on Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor, Wheeler Yuta and Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy, and Luchasaurus. Just a standard big tag team match, wild, crazy action from everyone involved. That saw Jungle Boy get the win for his team with the snare trap locked in on Angelico, who tapped out. So the babyfaces win. After the match, a lot of the babyfaces leave, and they leave Orange Cassidy in the ring by himself, who then gets jumped by the remainder of the Hardy Family Office, including the Blade and the returning Butcher. The Butcher has been away with an injury for a while, and he made his return here. A bunch of random babyfaces who weren't on the show, and some of the babyfaces who were in the match, all came running back out to provide the save, and they all stood tall, running off the heels. So that was the buy-in. The opener of the pay-per-view official was the TNT Championship. Miro, God's favorite champion, as he calls himself, defending against the Mad King, Eddie Kingston, in what turned out to be the best Eddie Kingston match that I have seen since he came to AEW. This is better than a lot of the matches that we saw him in last year with Lance Archer and even Jon Moxley. I thought the match earlier this year with Mox and Eddie Kingston taking on the Young Bucks was a really great match, but as for a singles showing for Eddie Kingston himself, this right here was one of the best matches I've seen him in, not only in AEW, but I've ever seen him in. Miro is just picture perfect in this role, in this Redeemer, God's favorite champion role. He is killing it. And Eddie Kingston, of course, we know he kills it on the mic every single week, but in ring wise, he's not really known for having the greatest matches. But here, he pulled out a lot of great stuff in this match, and he and Miro worked very well together. At one point, we saw Miro lock in what is formerly known as the Accolade, now known as, I believe, Game Over, just the camel clutch. But Eddie reached out and he got to the ropes. Eddie got back up, he hit the backhand, the spinning backhand, following the DDT, but the referee was busy putting the turnbuckle pad back on the corner turnbuckle. It got ripped off a little earlier, following a German suplex, so it was only good for a 2 count. But somewhere in here, I guess the 2 count got messed up. I did not fully see it, but the crowd was chanting "You fucked up" at the referee Bryce Remsburg, so apparently something got messed up there. Eddie went to shove Miro into the exposed turnbuckle, but then the referee stood right in the way and blocked it to prevent it from happening. And then in the mix-up, Eddie is trying to go for the half and half, but the referee, he's not looking, and right below, Miro kicks back and low blows Eddie Kingston, gives him a mule kick, and then bounces off the ropes to gain momentum, hits him with another mule kick, down goes Eddie Kingston, 1, 2, 3, Miro is still the TNT champion. The right outcome here, and as I mentioned, a great showing for Eddie Kingston, even in defeat, and with a finish like this, I would not mind seeing a rematch between these two. But as good as Eddie Kingston is, he is not the guy who I look at as being the man to take that championship away from Miro, so the right finish and a really cool way to open up the show. Up next, we got Jon Moxley taking on the legendary Satoshi Kojima, legendary Japanese icon from New Japan Pro Wrestling. I thought they had a really good match here. We had Moxley coming out wearing a GCW hoodie because he is the new GCW heavyweight champion after he beat Matt Cardona the previous night and set up a big match between himself and Nick Gage in the coming weeks. So Mox representing GCW here. I thought these two had a really great brawl. Nothing that overly stood out to me in this match. I know this was not the big New Japan star everyone was hoping Jon Moxley would face on this show, but I had no doubt that this would still be a good match, and that's exactly what it was. A nice stiff brawl between these two, as are most matches that Moxley has with other New Japan guys, because he works that style very well. And Kojima, he's much older, but he is still a legend, and he can still go in that ring, and I thought the two of them put on a really good match. In the end, Jon Moxley hit 2 paradigm shifts. He hit one, then kind of waited it out a little bit, lifted Kojima back up, dropped him with another paradigm shift, and got the victory. So Jon Moxley wins. After the match, we hear very familiar music, and after much stalling, we see the appearance of one of the scariest men on the face of the earth, MINORU Suzuki. And he comes out, he has a smile on his face. MINORU Suzuki smiling is one of the scariest sights you'll ever see. So he's slowly walking to the ring. The crowd is losing their minds. Of course, I failed to mention at the beginning of the show, this show took place at the Now Center in Chicago, Illinois. So, of course, the Chicago crowd loved seeing MINORU Suzuki come out. He gets in the ring. He and Moxley start trading forearms back and forth. They start brawling, and it ends with Suzuki standing tall, much to the delight of the fans. And they announced later on the show that this upcoming week on Dynamite, it'll be taking place in Cincinnati, Ohio. Of course, Jon Moxley's hometown, his homecoming, and a big homecoming present for him is a match against MINORU Suzuki. So that's pretty badass. So best believe I'm going to be tuning in to Dynamite this week to check that match out, because that sounds amazing. Up next, we had the AEW Women's World Championship on the line. Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, defending her championship against the undefeated Chris Statlander. Chris Statlander has been undefeated in AEW ever since returning a few months ago from injury. So this was a match that made the most sense for this show. And not for nothing, these two women put on a hell of a good match. It was a very good match, nice, short, and sweet, and nothing completely over the top, but I thought they worked really well together. The fans bought into Statlander a little bit, but they were really hot for Britt Baker, including a big spot that she performed in the match, which was her hitting Statlander with the Pittsburgh Sunrise, of course a play off the Panama Sunrise, performed and made famous by her better half, who may or may not have had an impact on the finish of this show. But Britt Baker hits the formerly known as Panama Sunrise, now the Pittsburgh Sunrise, then locks in the lockjaw and gets the victory over Kris Statlander, retaining her championship. It was pretty much almost a foregone conclusion that Britt Baker was not going to leave this show empty-handed, so she retains her championship in a very good match for the women. But speaking of very good matches, that is an insult to this next match, because this match was more than very good. It was excellent. And that was the AEW Tag Team Championship match. The Lucha Bros, Phoenix and Pentagon Jr. challenging Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, the AEW World Tag Team Champions, inside a steel cage. After weeks and months, really, of constant interference in Young Bucks matches, this cage match was set up to avoid any interference taking place, which didn't fully work, but it did work for the most part. But it kept these two teams locked inside the cage to do whatever the hell they wanted. And what they wanted was to steal the damn show, and that is exactly what they did. There's far too much craziness that took place in this match for me to fully recap and do it justice. If you didn't see this match, first of all, shame on you for not buying this pay-per-view. But aside from that, shame on you for missing this match. Please go out of your way to look it up and watch it from start to finish. Don't miss a moment. I know it'll be very difficult to keep track of all the crazy action. I tried my best to take notes and try to recap a lot of the big spots that took place in this match, so I will do my best to lay out a few of them for you. But all I can say is it was great. It was phenomenal. It was crazy action from the bell all the way to the finish. There was a lot of great near falls, a lot of great dramatic points over the course of this match. And it just made it so fun to watch. And it really made you think that, oh man, the Young Bucks are just going to retain. It's going to be business as usual. They're going to take out the Lucha Bros. Or it was right at the moment where you thought the Lucha Bros were going to win, and then the victory got yanked out from beneath them. It was great. It was a fantastic match. Of course, you have people in this match like Phoenix, who are crazy people. We saw Phoenix get hit with double super kicks. We saw him hit a double cutter on both Young Bucks at a certain point. We saw the Young Bucks do some crazy stuff. Matt with a tombstone on Pentagon Jr., while Nick hit a senton on Phoenix. It was only good for a 2 count. This was a cage match where there was no escape. It was only pinfall or submission. So everything was stuck inside the cage. All the action was taking place inside the cage, which I liked. We saw Matt hit a low blow on both Lucha Bros, which looked devastating. More bang for your buck gets hit, but Pentagon super kicks Nick to break the pinfall. We see the Bucks go to rip off both Pentagon and Phoenix's masks, which remained torn throughout all the way to the finish, which made it more dramatic when we got to see both men bleed. Both Phoenix and Pentagon were bleeding gushers in this match. Not full crimson mask, but they got some color on them, and it made it a lot more dramatic with the masks ripped off so you could see their faces just a little bit, so you could see the blood pouring out. We saw both Bucks lawn dart Phoenix into the cage wall. Brandon Cutler, who's on the outside in the Bucks' corner, of course, he had something in this black bag that he went all the way up the entrance ramp and just launched all the way into the cage. Of course, the open roof of the cage. It landed right in there. Matt caught it, and it was a shoe. It was a shoe that on the bottom of it had what looked like bedazzled parts, but no, they were thumbtacks that were basically glued to the bottom of this shoe. And Matt used this as a weapon. He went to use it on Phoenix, went to superkick Phoenix with it, but then Pentagon, who was beaten down, he crawled over and got in the way, trying to protect his little brother, which worked for a little while, because then he got punished. We saw Nick ram Pentagon's face into the shoe that was worn by Matt. We see the Bucks hit the BTE trigger. We think that's it. 1, 2, 3. But then Phoenix, at the very last second, breaks the cover, and the fans went crazy for it because they thought for sure that it was it. They were already deflated. They were ready for the finish. And then Phoenix broke the cover, and they went crazy for it. And I did too, because I thought that was a really clever false finish there. We see Phoenix start to go crazy. He gets hold of the shoe and starts to use it on Nick Jackson. We see a double dose of package pile drivers. Pentagon hitting Nick with a package pile driver, and Matt Jackson hitting Phoenix with a package pile driver. So then both big brothers stood face to face. They started to brawl a little bit. We see both men go up to the top turnbuckle, and it led to Pentagon hitting Matt Jackson with a Canadian Destroyer off the top rope down onto the floor. All four men are laid out. We see all the men start to chop each other. They start to super kick each other. Once again, all laid out. The Lucha Bros end up hitting an assisted package pile driver, only for Matt Jackson to break it up. Match still continues. Phoenix is encouraged by his brother to climb to the top of the cage, get all the way up to the top, the very tippy top of the cage, to hit another assisted foot stomp package pile driver combo. While Pentagon was setting up to get Matt Jackson in position for the move, Nick Jackson comes in out of nowhere, super kicks Pentagon, so Pentagon goes down. Nick Jackson climbs up to the top of the cage, attempts to go after Phoenix, but then Phoenix launches Nick Jackson. Jackson falls all the way down to the ground. We see Nick, Matt, and Pentagon. They're all together in the middle of the ring, and Phoenix from the very top of the cage does a huge diving crossbody, wipes out all three of the men. Big highlight of the match. And then both men, Phoenix helping out Pentagon, of course, gives an elevated underhook pile driver on Nick Jackson, and they get the 1, 2, 3. A huge ovation from the Chicago crowd because they just saw the titles change hands. The Lucha Bros are the new AEW Tag Team Champions. The reign of terror of the Young Bucks has finally come to an end, and it did so in one of the greatest tag team matches in the history of this company. Before this, I would say those honors belonged to the match we saw at Revolution in 2020, Hangman Page and Kenny Omega defending the tag team titles against the Young Bucks. That was originally my favorite tag team match in this company. This match right here, this steel cage match with the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, took the cake. They've always had great chemistry together. We saw that 2 years ago at All Out in a ladder match. This match right here blows that one clear out of the water, and this will go down as one of my favorite matches of the entire year. I cannot praise this match enough. It was excellent, and it was very great to see the Lucha Bros win. They win, and they are the new tag team champions. Where they go from here, I do not know. Them, the Young Bucks, we got a bit of an indication of where the Young Bucks are going to stand by the end of the show, but this was a great match. I can't put it over enough. Again, if you didn't see it, please go back and watch it. My words don't do it justice. You got to see it to believe it. It was an amazing match. Up next was a bit of a breather, come down. It was the Women's Casino Battle Royal. Of course, the winner of this match would get a future AEW Women's World Championship match. All the women came out in different groups, like these Casino Battle Royals usually are. They come out based on their card, whether it's, the Hearts or the Jacks or whatever. So I didn't recap each group of women, and I didn't recap every single woman who came out in this match. But some of the names that I jotted down that I remembered, honestly, I was just off a high, or still on a high of the previous match, that it was hard to really focus for the first 80% of this match, if I'm being completely honest with you. But many of the women in this match, we saw the Bunny, we saw Abaddon, we saw Hikaru Shida, we saw Rebel and Jamie Hayter, of course, the minions of Dr. Britt Baker. We saw Red Velvet, Anna Jay, Tay Conti, Sky Blue, who was a big crowd favorite from AEW Dark, Penelope Ford, of course, Nyla Rose and Jade Cargill, who formed some type of alliance, Legit Layla Hirsch, Thunder Rosa, and it all led to the big Joker entrant who had been speculated for weeks and weeks, and it was finally revealed to be Ruby Soho, the former Ruby Riott from WWE, Heidi Lovelace, if you know her from that name from the indies many years ago. She had been putting up these different videos online for the past few weeks, all ending with Destination Unknown. Did not know where she was heading, and we know now that she was heading right here to Chicago in All Elite Wrestling. So a big moment for her. She even came out to the Ruby Soho theme song, the Ruby Soho song from the band Rancid, which the crowd was singing along with. So yet another song trademark purchased by Tony Khan that the fans can sing along to. So in the closing moments of this match, some of the big eliminations that took place, we saw Jade Cargill. She was looking strong and dominant, eliminating people. She even basically bench pressed Layla Hirsch and dumped her out. So while she was looking strong, she got taken out from behind by Nyla Rose, who dumped her out. So Jade Cargill's gone. We saw Tay Conti eliminate Penelope Ford, who then herself got eliminated by Nyla Rose. Nyla Rose was the big, heavily booed figure in this match, which made whoever would eliminate her be the biggest babyface of the night, and that turned out to be Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa ended up eliminating Nyla Rose, and it came down to Thunder Rosa and Ruby Soho, which was great. You had it come down to two women. You had no idea which one would win. Either one of them made perfect sense, and the crowd loved both of them. So either way, the crowd was going to go home happy here, and they did when both women were fighting on the apron, both men teetering, looking like one's going to tip over. In the end, it was Ruby Soho who outlasted Thunder Rosa, eliminated her, and now Ruby Soho, on her first night in, gets a future AEW Women's Championship match. Big win for her. I'm very happy for her. I'm very happy. I'm a fan of hers. I've always been a fan of her in-ring work. A very underrated talent when she was in WWE. Consistently put on some really good matches in the company, and it sucked that they let her go, but we knew she would be a great addition to any women's division that she would join, and it just so happens to be AEW's, whose women's division is still one of the weaker points of the company, but with names like Ruby Soho, it is starting to get a little stronger, and it adds to names like Britt Baker, like Thunder Rosa, like Layla Hirsch, and so many other talented women that they have in this division who can hopefully start to get a little more shine. So good for Ruby. No idea when she's going to get the championship match. We do know this week on Dynamite she's going to compete in her debut match on Dynamite. No idea when the championship match is going to come, but looking forward to it. Up next we got Chris Jericho versus MJF. The fourth encounter of some kind between these two, and with the stipulation that if Chris Jericho were to lose, he would retire and he would never again wrestle in AEW. We saw the countdown clock, the classic Y2J countdown clock, start to count down. The fans were popping huge for it. The pyro goes off, and then we see some text up on the screen that reads Jericho's last match, and out comes MJF. Just the ultimate troll here. As for Jericho's special entrance, we saw Billy Gray, a member of the band Fozzy. Of course, Jericho is the leader of Fozzy. He was playing out Jericho on the guitar, playing out Jericho's Judas theme song. The fans were trying their hardest to sing along, but they and Billy Gray were very out of sync with one another, and it ended up sounding like complete garbage. So, unfortunate, but this won't be the last time the fans will get a chance to sing along with Judas following the finish of this match. I thought this was the best match that I've seen these two in. I haven't been overly impressed with a lot of the matches that Jericho and MJF have had up to this point, and quite frankly, I just haven't been all that impressed with a lot of the matches that Chris Jericho has had in the last year or so. He hasn't had anything that I would say rose above a good match since the match that he had with Jon Moxley at the Revolution pay-per-view last year. So, this was a very good match, all things considered. The drama of the stipulation added to it, and the fans bought into everything, including the little false finish they did in this match. They bought into all of it, hook, line, and sinker. We saw MJF work over Jericho's injured arm in this match. At one point, MJF hit the heat seeker on Jericho, dumped him right on his head on the ring apron. Jericho falls out to the floor. Referee starts to count, but Jericho barely makes it back in right at the count of 9. Then we see Wardlow start to make his way out, but not to soon be followed by Jake Hager. Both men are brawling. A bunch of referees come out to try to lead them to the back. Aubrey Edwards, she was the referee of the match. She was distracted by all this madness. Meanwhile, in the ring, MJF got the bat that belongs to Jericho, Floyd the Bat, used it on Jericho right in the gut. Then MJF hit his own move. He hit Jericho's own move, the Judas Effect. He connects with the Judas Effect, goes to cover Jericho. Jericho clearly gets his foot on the bottom rope, and Aubrey Edwards doesn't see it, and she counts the 1, 2, 3. And that's it. Jericho gets screwed. MJF gets a 4th victory over Jericho, and he retires him. Only it was a dusty finish. And a second referee who was out there, remember when all the guys, Hager and Wardlow, were brawling? A bunch of referees came out. There was one ref who was still out there, and he saw Jericho's foot still on the bottom rope, and he told Aubrey Edwards, and she called for the match to be restarted. Why the referee didn't say anything when MJF hit Jericho with the baseball bat, I don't know. Maybe they didn't see that part, but he did see Jericho's foot on the bottom rope during the count. So the match got restarted. Almost immediately, Jericho gets back up. He goes for the Judas Effect, but MJF blocks it. He ducks, so he avoids the Judas Effect. He locks in the Salt of the Earth submission hold, starts cranking back on it. Looks like Jericho's going to tap out, but then Jericho tries to escape it. He eventually does, and he reverses it into his own submission, the Walls of Jericho. MJF goes for the ropes, but then Jericho pulls him back in, locks it in tighter, and then MJF taps out feverishly, and Chris Jericho wins. Jericho can still wrestle. He is not going to move permanently to the announce table, thank God. So Jericho wins, and I thought this was a very good match. So good stuff here. Up next was the match that I, and I'm sure many of you, were looking forward to the most. the main event of this show in many ways, CM Punk in his first match in 7 years, taking on Darby Allen in what was overall a pretty solid match. Punk came out wearing tights. This is the first time I have ever seen CM Punk wrestle in tights, so that was pretty interesting and kind of jarring, quite frankly, to see. But that was it. The match started pretty slow. There was some basic wrestling holds and stuff like that for the early part. Nothing really overly exciting. I wouldn't call it boring. It was just very slow. It looked like both men were playing it safe and were building. They were building up to some of the more exciting parts of this match, and that eventually happened. We saw a backslide get attempted, but got slipped out, and then Punk ended up hitting the GTS on Darby Allen, but Darby got knocked out of the ring and went to the outside. And then the referee went to count. Looked like Darby's going to get counted out. Referee reaches 9, and then Darby rushes back into the ring. The same spot that we saw the previous match with Jericho and MJF. So, not impressed with them using that spot 2 matches in a row on this show. But it is what it is. We see Punk hit the running knees in the corner. Hits a big clothesline. Goes for another GTS, but then Darby got out of it. Punk on the outside. Darby hits his big suicide dive. He goes up to the top, hits a big swanton bomb out onto CM Punk. Gets Punk back in the ring. Darby goes up top. He mocks Punk with the go to sleep gesture. He goes for the coffin drop, but then Punk sits up and just barely avoids getting hit with the coffin drop. Darby tries to get the crucifix roll up on Punk, but in doing so, Punk gets Darby maneuvered on his shoulders, goes for the GTS, but then Darby slips out of it, goes for the Last Supper roll up, but it's only good for a 2 count. Eventually, Punk gets Darby up on his shoulders, almost in an electric chair position, but he maneuvers him into position for the GTS, hits it, and down goes Darby, and CM Punk gets the 1, 2, 3, and in his first match in 7 years, CM Punk comes out victorious. I thought this was a really good match. I was very impressed with Punk. He is not as flawless, seemingly flawless, as he once was those 7 or 8 years ago when he was originally competing full-time consistently, but I thought for what he did here, he was very impressive. Darby Allen absolutely looked like a star who on the level and caliber of CM Punk. After the match, Sting came back out. He shook hands with Punk. Punk helped Darby to his feet. They shook hands, and man, you couldn't ask for a better match for these two guys. I'm sure if they had another match in the future, it could potentially be even better. But for what this was here tonight, I thought they put on a great match. We got an announcement of the next pay-per-view, that being Full Gear. Going to be taking place Saturday, November 13th in St. Louis, Missouri. And then the next match, the piss break match, the buffer match between the other main event and then the second main event, that being QT Marshall taking on Paul Wight. The less said about this match, the better. Stuff happened, but in the end, Paul Wight hit the choke slam and got the 1, 2, 3 over QT Marshall. Enough said there. Good for him. Good for Paul Wight getting back in the ring, but I didn't really care about the match, and that was the outcome, so there you go. Now on to the second main event, the AEW World Championship on the line, Kenny Omega and Christian Cage. I thought this was a good match, but it was not great, and it honestly did not feel like a big enough match to close out the show. This match closed out the show because of what happened on the post show, but otherwise, the match itself was good, but it really did not rise above that. I thought the match that these two had weeks ago on Rampage for the Impact Championship was great, and I thought it was an even better match than this one. But there was just no point in this match where I bought into the idea of Christian Cage beating Omega for the AEW World Championship. And I think a lot of the crowd could not really buy into that idea either, and that was kind of hurting this match and the drama of it. At no point did I really believe that Cage would win, but they worked hard and they put on a pretty good match. There was a table brought into the equation. Early on, we saw Omega hit a foot stomp off the apron and landed on Christian, who had a table placed over him. And then in the meantime, Omega and Don Callis set up a table on the outside, but it was ignored until later on in the match. Both men were on the apron trying to hit each other with their finishing move to crash through the table, and it was Christian who ended up spearing Omega off the apron. Both men crashed through the table. Eventually, Gallows and Anderson made their way out. They tried to interfere. Anderson got taken out, and then Gallows got up on the apron. He was holding Christian. Don Callis was distracting the referee. Omega goes to hit a V-trigger on Christian, but Christian moves, ends up connecting with the V-trigger on Big Doc Gallows. Gallows goes down. Christian hits the kill switch, and only good for a 2 count. Don Callis gets in the ring and quickly leaves to avoid any interaction with Christian. Both men go up to the top. Christian is going for a kill switch up top, but then Kenny Omega gives him the old eye gouge, gets him up on his shoulders, and hits him with the one-winged angel all the way from the top. 1, 2, 3. As if there was any doubt, Christian Cage loses, and Kenny Omega is still the AEW World Champion. But that was not the big story of the match. The big story was the post-match. And that's where we saw the rest of the Elite come out. The Young Bucks, Doc Gallows, Carl Anderson, they all came back out. They're all beating down Christian. We saw Jurassic Express come out. They tried to help, but they got beaten down. Kenny Omega's back on the microphone, and he's saying a bunch of stuff, and basically he's saying there's no one who can beat him. No one here who can beat him. Anyone who could potentially beat him is either not here, they are already retired, or they are dead. Cue the lights going out, and then we see Adam Cole. His music hits, Titantron, big pop for Adam Cole. Yes, former longest reigning NXT champion Adam Cole, who just a few weeks ago was tapping out to Kyle O'Reilly at NXT TakeOver. Here's Adam Cole, free agent Adam Cole, coming out here. He gets in the ring, goes face to face with Kenny Omega, and then he super kicks Jungle Boy. And Omega says more stuff in the mic. He gives the mic over to Adam Cole, who says that the Elite is stronger than ever and they are unstoppable. Kenny Omega goes to do his big closing pay-per-view sign-off when we hear a remixed version of Ride of the Valkyries, and out comes Bryan Danielson. The big AEW debut of Bryan Danielson, the long-awaited debut of Bryan Danielson. He comes out, gets a huge ovation. He gets in the ring. He joins the rest of the baby faces. They are face-to-face with the heels, that being mainly Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Adam Cole. But then Omega bails, and then there's a huge brawl that takes place. Bryan, his target is Nick Jackson, hits him with the rapid-fire yes kicks in the corner, and eventually he hits the running knee on Nick Jackson. The heels bail, and the babyfaces stand tall, with Bryan Danielson front and center. And I can't tell you a better finish to this show than that. With a show that had everything that it had, that is about as great of an ending as you could possibly hope for. It was awesome. as a fan, as a true fan of this business of professional wrestling, this was fun. And it's fun when you see people doing this stuff who have fun doing it. And that's why it's so fun to see Bryan Danielson here in AEW. That's why it's fun to see Adam Cole in AEW and CM Punk and Ruby Soho and all of these names. I know these are names that we saw in that other company, and I'm sure there's a lot of criticism to that. The fact that a lot of the big names on this show are the likes of Daniel Bryan and CM Punk and Ruby Riott and Adam Cole and all those people from WWE. But take a second to think about how much of a detriment that is to WWE. That company had the names of Ruby Riott and CM Punk and Daniel Bryan and Adam Cole, and they let all of them slip through their fingers, and they let them go to their direct competition in All Elite Wrestling. That's more of a knock on WWE than anything else. So they're here. These names are here in AEW. I'm looking forward to what they do. What does this mean? Is Bryan Danielson, is he going to get a championship match at some point in the future? Potentially. The way I see it, there is a big 8-man tag team match that could get set up here with Jurassic Express, Christian Cage, and Bryan Danielson against Omega, the Bucks, and Adam Cole. Sounds like a big main event for that Arthur Ashe Stadium show in New York in a few weeks. And eventually I could see the big match being Adam Cole versus Bryan Danielson. So, fun times here. Again, I thought this was just a tremendous pay-per-view. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And this will go down as one of my favorite shows of the entire year. And it just makes me very proud to be a wrestling fan. And I don't know what else to say other than I had a blast. So, if you like this show, comment below. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you loved. Tell me what you hated. Just sound off in the comment section. Again, like this video. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at DerekJ Speaks. And thank you all for joining me. And I hope you all have a great night. Thank you. See you next time.